The purpose of this video is to create some persistent data. So the idea here is that we're going to enter in some value. We're going to enter in a value. There we go. And then when the user clicks on enter, we will get a little pop-up just letting us know that our data was successfully written to a text file, which is what we're doing in this application. And then when I click on enter, this activity is reading the data out of that text file and then bringing the data over. And I don't know if you saw that little pop-up. The toast just said that we were able to create our file successfully, that it successfully wrote the file. So that's where we're headed in this video, in this series for the week. Let's get started. To get started with this project, I have taken the liberty of getting some things set up ahead of time. These are things we've already gone over, so this should look familiar. I have created a activity main page that has a edit view that the user can type in their name. I've created a button that will enable us to go to the next activity, which happens to be, in my case, activity welcome. And on this page, I have a text view that is just giving a title, members only, and then I've created just a placeholder. This is where I'm going to put the welcome message based on the name that the user put into the edit view in the prior screen and this screen. I've also gone into my main activity Java, taken some liberties here. Again, this should look familiar. Initialize the variables in order to get to the button and to the edit text, so that way I can get the value out of that control. I've created a click event for the button, and in the click event I've started an activity that is going to open up our welcome activity. So just to give you the visual of where we are, the user will type in their name, and then when they click the enter button, we will be taken to our members only page, and then there'll be welcome and whatever name they put in. So that is the setup, and let's get started on how we can persist data from one page, one activity, to the next one. All right, so let's get started. On our main activity page, we're going to write data to a text file. That way we'll have persistent data not only from activity to activity, but from a different session. So if someone opens up the app another point in time, that data would still be in the text file. So we're going to open up, write data to a text file, and to do that we need to open up a file stream. And here's how we do that. So we're going to do file output stream. Oh, we're not doing input, we're doing output. So let's do file output stream, and I'll call it fout for file out equals, and we're going to open file output, and we're going to put the name of our file, which is my text file, I think I said, or something like that, my text file.txt, and then this is just going to be for this app, so we'll do mode private. And you can see that I'm getting some big ugly red lines, and let's see what the red lines are telling us. Unhandled exception. And so sometimes when we have Java, or this is a Java thing, that this particular method is not allowing us to use it unless we implement a try catch with it. In other words, what should the system do if it can't create the file, or if maybe it's out of resources, or it can't find the file? So it wants a try catch. And so we'll just write one. So I'm going to do a try, and then we'll do a catch, and we'll just do something generic at this point. We'll just catch a generic exception and open and close that. And so this should make our little system a little happier. So we'll put in our opening of the file into our try. So try to open up this stream, try to open up this file, or create this file. If you can't, then create the exception. And let's just handle that exception. We'll create a toast notification if for some reason, this will help us do some troubleshooting, get base context, and then we'll do e dot, we should be able to get the message, and then the length would be toast. We'll do length long, dot show. Okay, so now we've handled the error. So if for some reason the output, this stream doesn't work, try that. If it doesn't work correctly, then go ahead and give us a toast message of what the error was. But we'll assume everything's working along just fine, and we'll progress on from here. So now we've handled this squiggly red line and the necessity to implement a try-catch error, try-catch block should our opening of the output stream doesn't work. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we need to open up a stream to that file. So in other words, we've got, this is the file we want to use. Now we have to create a stream that we'll be able to get data back and forth, create a stream, create a connection between our file and our application. And that in this case is output. So we're going to get output stream reader, stream writer. I said reader, outer, writer, input, output stream writer equals new output stream writer, and we're going to be using the file we created in the line above. So we'll put in f out. So now we've created here's the name of the file. We've created a stream of connection between our data in our app and that file. And so now we'll be able to write data to that file. All right, so where's that data coming from? Well, that's coming from our edit box that we have in Activity Main. So we need to get that data. So above that try catch, then we'll do something like it's a string. I'll call it data equals, and then we need to, I don't think we have a connection on that. Yes, we do right here. So we grabbed text name already. So we'll do text name dot, and then we'll do get text and convert it to strings. So there's good, but this is a little upset, and that's because we need to declare, since we're in an inner class, we need to declare when we initialize this variable, we need to declare it as a final. So I'll come back up here to where we initialized the text name, and I'll create that as a final variable. And so now we should be good to go. All right, so we're getting our data from the edit field, the edit, text edit. I get so confused with these names when I'm talking. So from the control where we set up the ability to get the name, which just to be obvious is enter your name. So that was a, let me get the wording right. That was a plain text, edit text. There's a lot of things in there. Edit text view. So there we go. That would be the exact terminology. So out of this control where they entered their name, we got the value. We opened up a stream, or opened up a file, connected with a stream, and now we need to write that data. So we're going to use our output stream to write, and we're going to write the data that we received from that text file, or from that control where we put in our name. All right. So the last thing that you do whenever you're finished writing to a file or utilizing a resource, a file resource, is you need to close it. So we'll do ow.close. We'll close that stream. And just for good measure, then we can do, let's do toast, make text, get base context, and we'll do wrote to file. And then, so wrote to file, I actually spelled that correctly, how unusual. Toast dot toast length long dot show, just so we can give ourselves some feedback that that all worked. And then we'll probably should move our start activity then into that part of the try catch because it was successful. All right, so now we have written the file, and we can go ahead and run our emulator just to see if that part works. Of course, we're not going to see if it actually wrote, I mean, hopefully it wrote the data because it's going to give us this message, but then we'll read that data on the next, in the next part. So I'm going to go ahead and run my emulator and make sure that that worked. All right, so now I have my little emulator up. I'll type in my name. Maybe I won't. And then when I click on enter, at the least I should right now get a toast message if it wrote the file, or I'm going to get an error message, and then it should start the activity. So there's my wrote to file, and it started my activity. So I know that this portion seems to be working. So now the next part is I need to, instead of having the word placeholder, we're going to put in welcome and then whatever name they entered. All right, so let's move on to our welcome Java page. First thing we need to do is initialize some variables. I need to get a variable for the text view that we're going to write to. We're going to put in the welcome or something along those lines. Alt enter to import that library. Include import. Let's see where we're going. Find view by ID. Oops. Equals find view by ID. And mine was called text. Oh, let's see. r.id.text. And mine is text welcome. And then I need a couple of variables for the data. So we'll do string and then data, and data is what I will use to read in the data, and then we'll use buffer, which is where we'll get from the file. So I'm going to initialize this initially to empty string. Okay. Wrong language. I can't do that in this language. There we go. All right. All right, so just like we needed to do a try catch for the output stream, we're going to have to do the same thing for the input stream. So I'm just going to set that up ahead of time rather than showing you the error message, because you get the idea. So we're going to do a try and a catch again, and we're going to just catch a generic exception, and we'll put in here something, again, toast, dot make text, and we'll do get base context, and we'll do something like e dot get message like we did before, and then our duration toast dot length long dot show, just to get that out of the way. All right, so show us the error message if for some reason we can't open up our input string. So now we'll set up our input string. So again, set up the input stream to the file we want to read. All right, so this time we're going to use file instead of output stream. We're going to use input stream. Fn is equal to open file for input. And again, the name of our file was my text file, I believe is what I did. And we need to do the same thing we did before, where we need to input a stream, and we're going to use in Java something called a buffered reader. Buffered reader. A new input stream reader. And what buffer reader is going to allow us to do is, let me finish typing, otherwise I will get all confused. Okay, so buffered reader is going to allow us to, we've created a stream to that file, but we're going to need to read it in parts. So we're going to read it line by line until we get to the end of file. And so we're going to, as we read in each line, of course, in this case, we only have one line because we just wrote the name. But if we had multiple lines of data, then we're going to read it into the buffer. You could read it in as an array or whatever you wanted to do, but we're just going to make it as read it in as a string, because I know I only have one thing in there for this particular example. But so let's just do it. So while, and then I'm going to use, we said data is the variable I'm going to use to test for an end of file. So while data equals, so we're going to read in a line, br read line. Okay. And then our condition is, me get all my parentheses right. Well, data BR is not equal to null. And so we have data read line. So this is my while condition out here, and that needs to close here. All right, so there we go. Well, data equals read line. I've got this in the wrong place. So let's make sure I get this correct before we move on. There we go. Okay, so data is going, this part is reading in each line by line, till it gets that break return. So line by line, it's reading in our text file. It is putting that line into data. And this part where it says the condition is where that is not null, when the stream reader gets to the end of that text file, it triggers what's called an end of flag indicator. And in this case, that end of flag indicator is null. So if the stream reader returns null, that's an indication to our while loop that we've reached the end of the file, and therefore we're going to exit out of our loop. So that's what's happening here. So we're going to read line by line and put that into data. We're going to check to make sure that whatever's read in is not null or an end of file, and we will keep reading each line in until we get to the end of file. So we're going to append to buffer our data. And so that's why we had to set buffer equal to an empty string up here, because, oh, I have to spell buffer, B-U-F-F-E-R, because you can't do a plus equals, you can't append something to plus equals if you don't have a value in it to start with. So in other words, I'm sure you've gotten that from other programming classes, but let's just be obvious. So now I've got an error because we can't plus equals, we can't append to something that we haven't created or initialized in the first place. So that's why that was an empty string. And now we're good to go there. All right, so all that's left is, once we're done with that reading in of the file, we're going to write that to our text field. So in the moment I have the word placeholder in it, here is where I have that field in a variable. And so we'll do text, called it text welcome, set text, and then we're going to put in whatever we read into or appended to our buffer. So assuming we don't have any errors, now we should be reading and writing to a text file that is being displayed in our new activities. So I'm going to put this on pause while I launch my never ending or unseemingly ending emulator, and I'll meet you back here in a minute. All right, so here we are back. Probably should do this a little different here, but anyway, so we'll write in my name, Kirsten Markley, and let's see what happens when we click on enter. So in theory, it should give me a pop-up message saying all went well. It should open up my activity, and then my name, which I can't even spell right. My name is not spelled like that. There we go. That's pretty bad. All right, so I'm going to hit enter, and let's see what happens. And now we see that that name is written to our text file. So our read and write worked successfully, and we were able to have persistent data in our application. So yay. All right, your turn. Get to your assignment. So the final test, if you want to run it through a final test, is to created a button, a read button on my activity main page. And so the idea is, if in fact that data is being held in a text file and that data is persistent across my application, so if I close the app and reopen it, that text file should still be there. And so to test that, then I created a read button on my main activity. And then the placeholder. So the idea then in theory should be, if I click on the read button and assuming I've already entered the data, and then it should be able to read from that file and put that into my little placeholder here. And so in my main activity, I created pretty much what we just copied and pasted, almost what we did in our welcome page. That is, I created a new on-click listener for that button. Pretty much the same thing, except I used a new ID, obviously. And then tried to grab the data. I didn't do a check to see if the data was null, which probably would be a good idea as well. In other words, did the user not enter anything in yet? But regardless, so we did an input, and then I checked the same thing we did over in the prior step. And then I didn't put in the catch. But the idea is then when I relaunch this application, so I've shut it down, and if I relaunch it then, and I go to persistent data, in theory, since I wrote Kirsten Markley last time, I should be able to read it and it should be in my placeholder. And so there it is. So it is maintaining persistent data, not only from my view to view, but also in the application as well. So persistent data.